modern agriculture, as already Manuela told us. But their impact extends far beyond controlling pests. They pose a significant threat not only to the environment, but also to the health and safety of farmers, nearby communities and society as a whole. Farmers, who are at the heart of our food system, are often the most exposed to these harmful chemicals. Despite providing one of the most essential resources for our society, they frequently work without adequate protection, putting their health and even their survival at risk. Shockingly, these workers can unknowingly carry pesticides home on their clothing, exposing their families. Communities living near agricultural fields are also at risk due to pesticide drift and volatilization. For the general population, diet is the main source of pesticide exposure. Residues on fruits, vegetables, and even animal-based products can lead to long-term health risks. Pesticides also contaminate the drinking water. The risks associated with pesticides depend not only on the chemicals themselves, such as active substances, adjuvants, and co-formulants, but also on how they are used. The frequency, volume, and method of application, as well as the type of crop and soil, all play a role in determining the level of exposure and potential harm. Germany, France, Spain, and Italy account for the highest volumes of pesticides sold in the EU and are also the top 4 agricultural producers, as you know. However, pesticide use is not just a European issue, it's a global crisis. Every year, 385 million people in agriculture suffer from acute pesticide poisoning, with 11,000 deaths reported. Europe records 1.6 million cases. As part of European Green Deal, the Farm to Fork strategy has set ambitious targets for 2030, as you know. A 50% reduction in the use and risk of chemical pesticides, 50% reduction in the use of the most hazardous ones, at least 25% of EU agricultural land dedicated to organic farming. These goals are reinforced by the vision for agriculture and food that Manuela already mentioned, which aims to create a more sustainable and resilient farming system. A key principle is ensuring that hazardous pesticides banned in the EU are not allowed back through imported products. In 2025, indeed, the European Commission will conduct an impact assessment to evaluate the effects of this policy on trade and competitiveness and, if necessary, propose legal changes. Reducing pesticide use will go hand in hand with promoting safer alternatives. The EU has withdrawn many harmful substances, but the development and approval of biological and low-risk plant protection products have lagged behind. So the Vision for Agriculture and Food recognised this issue, warning that if the trend continues, it could threaten Europe's food production. To address this, the Commission will accelerate the approval of biopesticides, which is a very positive point, through a fast-track system in 2025. This will introduce clear definitions for biocontrol active substances, allow provisional authorizations while evaluations are ongoing, and simplify regulatory procedures. So a truly just transition in agriculture can only be achieved if we balance health, production, and the well-being of society as a whole. Without this balance, sustainability remains an illusion, because a system that harms people or the environment cannot be called just. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, MEP Nardella and MEP Ripa, for your commitment and to this issue and your sense of urgency and your very clear framing of the issue that we are discussing today. My name is Annelies, as already announced. I will be facilitating this session today. Without further ado, we will go to our first speaker. We are a bit delayed in the program, but we will work around that. So Violette Gijzen from Wageningen University will be presenting the impacts of pesticides from a quite broad research projects. We also have a presentation, so that's the first test to see if presentations work. Violette, you have the floor. You have 10 minutes.
Oh, I was told I have 15, yes, but it would be nice if...
We are trying to shorten it.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the invitation here. I will show you something about pesticide residues in the European environment and in people. It is the first and until now unique assessment we have done in Europe across matrices and in 10 different European countries to see what we are talking about. What are the real pesticide residues we find? What we did, as you can see here, we're working in 10 different countries. We're working on the main European cropping systems. We were sampling in 20 to 204 samples per matrix in ecosystems, and we had 670 human participants. We tested about 200 different pesticide residues, and 32 of them are used for dual use. This means they are as well used for biocides. So here you can see what we sampled, and this was the most extensive sampling which has been ever done in Europe. So we sampled the terrestrial ecosystem, the aquatic ecosystem, and indoor dust and air. And in humans, we sampled blood, urine, feces, food, and wristbands to see what is the exposure of humans to the skin. So in total, we have analyzed 1,800 environmental samples and 4,000 human samples. First of all, to know how many pesticides do farmers apply. And following interviews, we found out that 7 to 37 compounds are applied in each case study site. Is there any risk known about these different pesticides which are applied either in a tank together or a sequencing in a growing season? No, they are not tested together. And following farmers' interviews, 23% of these applications exceeded recommended application dose. What we found, and I will give you here only a snapshot because we only sampled once in summer 2021 in the growing season. You can find here the results for conventional farming, CF, and organic farming, OF, for soils. So we found in all soils mixtures of pesticides, even in organic farms, although organic farms had lower concentrations. In organic farms, especially old ones, like DDTs, were present. And so far, to the moment, we don't want to import them. We have the forbidden ones already here. In water as well, in crops, in air, in sediment, all mixtures were present. And what you can see here, in indoor dust, we found, as with conventional farmers, between 50 and 120 different pesticides in indoor dust. For organic farmers, it were less, but still, until more than 100 pesticides. If you have a baby playing on the ground, taking the indoor dust, taking it like ingestion, what do we know? What is the risk? We don't know. So, first of all, for ecosystem, our risk assessment, our colleagues, we did tests, ecosystem tests in the laboratory, and so we thought, first of all, we saw that 70 to 80% of the pesticide residues which we detected in the environment are moderately toxic based on EFSA conclusions. We made these tests in the laboratory, testing a part of the mixtures which we found in the case study sites. And what we found is that even when single pesticide concentrations were below the threshold values, and we added them all up, theoretically there would be no toxicity seen in the field for earthworms, for terrestrial environment or the aquatic environment. But it was not the case. We had significant toxic effects of pesticide mixtures at the measured environmental concentrations, although, following EFSA regulations, they were supposed to be not toxic, each of them. And what we as well find out is if we do multi-species tests in the laboratory, or not only a single species test, and we use sensitive indicators like native species, then the detected risk increases. That means the actual risk assessment does not reflect the real risk we detect in the field. To strengthen the EFSA risk assessment, we propose integrating mixture toxicity assessment rather than evaluating single chemicals in isolation. The EFSA is already working on this. Expanding testing protocols to include native species and multi-species studies and long-term field research. Standardizing higher tier testing to ensure scientific validity and transparency. Enhancing guidelines for complex mixtures. And here important, including tanks mixtures and sequential applications. And these applications should be based on the recommended applications for a crop. And improving safety margins to take into account for co-exposure risks. But humans don't live isolated from the ecosystems. Humans can be exposed to pesticides by ingestion by food, inhalation of air, indoor dust, dermatal uptake by pesticides that are in the air or that are in the water, and as well surely ingestion by drinking water. So we have to say we have dietary and non-dietary exposure. Both leads to an aggregated internal exposure. And what does it mean for the risk? Next one. I want to show here now what, following EFSA conclusions, is the hazard described for the different pesticides we have detected in indoor dust. On the left side you can see that mainly we see as well for organic and conventional farmers, most farmers in the houses from the conventional farmers have 70 to 100 different pesticides in indoor dust. And conventional organic farmers have less, but as well here still a lot of them have 70 to 100 different pesticides in indoor dust. We as well tested it for consumers living in cities and neighbors. Here the numbers are a little bit lower, but they are as well in the range from 40 to 80 different pesticides. You can imagine that we will never be able to test all these combinations of the pesticides we detect in indoor dust on human health risk. Therefore, we here focus first of all to look what is a hazardous description. That means what is the potential toxicity of these substances. And what we found here again in indoor dust, you can see a non-approved ones. There were the DDTs, HCHs, and the ones which are forbidden since 40, 50 years. They are still there. Why are they there? They are in the soils, they are absorbed to the soils, and then transported by wind erosion into our environment, and they accumulate, for example, in indoor dust. And you can see here as well the difference with CF, conventional farmer, organic farmers. And I focus here on the three hazardous descriptions: cancerogenity, endocrine disruptors, and reproduction development effects. What for me was surprising, that even from the approved pesticides, in the indoor dust, about 30% were cancerogenic, or potentially possible cancerogenic. For endocrine disruptors, a lot of data is not available because they were only introduced to be tested some time ago. But here as well, part of them are endocrine disruptors. And the most surprising for me were that about 60% of the pesticides detected in the indoor dust have yes or possible reproduction development effects. As we know, risk means exposure times hazard. That means if a child is eating on the ground, how much of these pesticides does it ingest? How much do we inhalate to get ill? This we cannot say. We tried, next one. We measured what people have in feces, urine and blood. Here I show only the results for urine. And what can be seen that farmers had until 16 different pesticides above the detectable limit in their urine. And the minimum number is about 7 or 8. Here you can see the differentiation between the different countries. Netherlands is here on the top with the highest amount of number of pesticides in urine. What do we suggest? We made some, with colleagues, we made some in vitro and in vivo tests with mixtures and as well with single pesticides to see what could be the risk, or in vitro tests to see what is the hazard. You can imagine that it is not possible to test all the mixtures we found. So we tested only selected mixtures and as well as selected single pesticides, and there we used sensitive indicators. And what comes out of these tests will be shown exactly in 25th of June when we have the sprint final meeting here in Brussels. But now I will give you just some indications which you have found out. Is in the sprint in vivo test, pesticide exposure show social behavior changes. And this is not included into the EFSA regulations. So that means this could clearly be stated in mouse and in rat experiments. So we urgently suggest to include these kind of tests into the EFSA tests, because it's not just cancerogenity or neurotoxicity which is relevant, as well our behavior, like anxiety, like behavior or others are very relevant. In the sprint in vivo tests, we saw that so-called safe doses even showed effects. So that means we strongly recommend to increase safety factors to lower exposure thresholds where safety values are missing or showing that there are problems, although these doses seems to be low or safe. We as well recommend to require more comprehensive toxicology testing for vulnerable populations and sensitive outcomes, for example, for children, for pregnant women, etc. What we see that in the, based on interviews with Sprint, but as everybody who is farmer knows this as well, a high number of pesticide is applied during the growing season. There is no risk estimation what these combined applications or sequential applications during a week or a growing season means for farmers' health. So that should be, before these pesticides are approved to the market, there should be made tests with the pesticides which are recommended to be used together, either in a tank or in a growing season on a crop. And then, what is very important, environmental exposure, inhalation and skin absorption, uptake for pesticides can be, for some pesticides, higher than uptake by food. So it's very important to include aggregate exposure into EFSA regulations, accounting for non-dietary and environmental exposure of consumers in regulation. What about post-marketing safety? As I have shown, we found a lot of pesticides in the environment and human matrices after they have been applied. So we suggest here to implement EU-wide human biomonitoring programs, expand existing environmental monitoring programs as well for air and domestic environment for farmers, families and others. We do air monitoring, yes, and we know what is fine dust, which fine dust is in it. But as well in the air, we find a lot of organic pollutants which are never measured and never monitored. We require harmonized national registers on pesticide use, and this only allows us to know what is really applied, and now this is missing. It's there in several countries, like in Czechia, but in the main countries of Europe, this is missing. We need a target reduction in highest health risk pesticides and cropping combinations. And we need a rapid response research program for following population-based negative health outcomes in farming communities. And last but not least, I know that you like numbers. And the question is, who will pay all this? It's always a discussion. Food must be cheap and available for everybody, cheap food. If we here look at the modeling which our colleagues from Denmark did to see what is the damage cost per year related to ecosystem health and human health, they use the US ETOX model. So there we come with the costs in the different countries. You see here the dot gives the total costs. Then we see that we come nearly at $10 billion euro per year and country. This is a cost, the hidden cost we all pay with our taxes for the use of pesticides, and which could be used to convert agriculture to a more sustainable system. Last one, take-home messages for you. Pesticide residue mixtures are omnipresent in ecosystems and humans and highly accumulated in indoor dust. Most of the residues are hazardous for ecosystem and humans. We need pesticide regulations that assess real risk, including sensitive indicators. And we need a transition to more sustainable and 2030 ready agriculture systems based on ecological principles. And therefore, we need all stakeholders on board to achieve a transition towards reduced pesticide use. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Violette. This was really a wake-up call. It's scientifically proven, very in-depth research that shows actually long-term risks for people and for animals, for our broader ecosystems. So I think we've had this. I've heard this wake-up call. Also, thank you very much for bringing in proposals for solutions on how to improve measures. So we have solutions. There are things that can be done here at European level, at different levels. So yeah, let's also work with that. Even if the SUR was abandoned, there's still a lot that can be done with the current framework. So yeah, thank you for opening this up and for the work that you do. So we have, we're going to focus on solutions now, which we know are already around and already being practiced by several actors. So our first speaker will be Romain Nardella from the Institut Agro from Dijon. I will let you shortly introduce yourself as well. You will also have 10 minutes. You also have a presentation. I'm checking if that's okay. Voilà. So you have 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So my name is Romain Nardella. I'm a researcher in Institut Agro Dijon in France. And I'm going to talk about the economic feasibility of pesticide use reduction in the arable sector, and I'm going to base my presentation on evidence from the French DEFI Farm Network. So, as we've seen just before, pesticide use impacts health and the environment and induce costs to the society. That's why policies were implemented in the EU, and now the target of reducing by 50% pesticide use was set in the farm-to-fork strategy. Nevertheless, as we can see here on the graph of the evolution of pesticide sales in the EU since 2011 to 2022, despite a slight decrease here starting in 2018, this target seems ambitious to attain, and this objective will be difficult to attain. So why is that? What explains this limited progress? We can cite three main reasons here. The first one is going to be the lack of evidence on the large-scale agronomic feasibility of pesticide use reduction. The second one is going to be the risk aversion to economic loss in farms, and that's the one I'm going to focus on today. And the third one, sorry, just a step back. I had an animation. And the third one is going to be the fear of the possible consequences on agricultural productivity and food sovereignty of pesticide use reduction. So now, first, I'm going to have to give you some insights on how do we achieve pesticide reduction in arable farming. So let's start by talking about crop diversification. We can first, for example, use longer crop rotations. So here, instead of doing a 3-year crop rotation, we can do a 4-year crop rotation. We can also introduce more robust crops into the rotation. So for example, here, instead of growing barley, we can grow triticale. We can also use hardier cultivars, which is, for example, here, if we take wheat as an example, instead of using a quite productive but quite also sensible to pest cultivar Chevignon, we can use another one, for example, the Guastel cultivar, which is slightly less productive, but which is also slightly more robust against pests. All of that can also be done together with the moderation of fertilization, which can reduce pest pressure in some crops. And this can also be done with some more specific practices, such as tillage, and others, such as mechanical weeding, which will, for example, destroy mechanically the weeds that are present in the interranks of the crops. And finally, we can use some biocontrol, which is going to be talked about a bit more later. But the most important thing to understand here is that all of these practices are much more efficient when they're combined. And when they're combined, we've seen in a study that we performed in 2024 in a set of French arable farms, that combining these practices allow these farms to reach pesticide use reduction levels of 20% on average, but that within those farms, 24% of those enabled to reduce their pesticide use by more than 50%. But now this comes to the question that is central to my talk today, which is, does implementing those alternative cropping practices influence farm economic performances? So to answer to this question, we use the French DEFI farm network, which is a network of 2,000 commercial farms engaged in pesticide use reduction, which was created within the Ecofito French National Action Plan. And in these networks, farmers are helped by advisors on the specific goal of pesticide use reduction. The participation by farmers is voluntary. They receive no financial incentives, which is very important because it means that making profit needs to remain one of their most important objectives. And we chose 867 arable farms belonging to 8 farm types from these 2,000 commercial farm types. So we have, for example, farms that grow a lot of cereals, farms that grow a lot of maize, and so on. And within these farms, we looked at the change in pesticide use, here expressed by the treatment frequency index, or TFI, the evolution of gross products, the evolution of gross margin among all of the farm types over time, time being 9.2 years on average. And if we look at that, we see that we can see a reduction, an average pesticide use reduction of 18% in these farms and throughout that time. And we can see, if we look now at 2 metrics of economic performances that were used, first starting with gross product, which equals the crop yields multiplied by the selling prices, we can see that in the same farms and over the same period, gross product was reduced by 57 euros per hectare, which is 5%. And now if we look at the evolution of gross margin, always in the same farms, gross margin being the gross product minus the production cost, we see that it stagnated because it only decreased by 1.5 euros per hectare. But the question, but these evolutions of the economic performances were quite variable across farm types. But the question that raises from that is, are the evolutions in gross product and gross margin observed among the farm types related to the evolution in pesticide use that were also observed among the farm types? And to answer to this question, I'm going to focus on the cereal farms from now on. And if we look here on the y-axis at the changes in gross product expressed in euros per hectare, on the x-axis the change in pesticide use, and if we draw the relationship between both, we see that in the farms where pesticide use was decreased, gross product also tended to be decreased, and on the opposite, in the farms where pesticide use increased, gross products tended to be increased. So now if we do a little agronomy to explain why, well, in cereal farms, generally pesticide reduction can be achieved by the use of robust cultivars that have been selected for other purposes than maximizing yields. These cultivars are often sown a bit later. This helps to avoid the period of pest presence on the crops, on the parcel, but this also decreases the overall presence of the crop in the field. So it decreases the growing period and can lead to decreases in final yields. This is often made together with reduction in fertilization, which, as I said before, can reduce pest pressure in some crops, but can also induce reduction in yields, of course. But what's important here is that this relationship was not statistically significant. And if we look at all of the other farm types, we see exactly the same trend. Now, if we look at the link between the change in gross margin, here always on the y-axis, and the change in pesticide use here on the x-axis, well, we see that in the farms where pesticide use reduction was associated with the reduction in gross product, the reduction in the gross product was offset by the reduction in pesticide and fertilization costs. And again, this relationship was not significant, and again, we saw this trend in all of the other farm types. So what we can conclude at this stage, in terms of economic feasibility of pesticide use reduction, is that the practices that were used to reduce pesticide use can lead to decreases in gross product, especially in farms growing large amounts of high value-added crops, but that on average, the reduction in fertilization and pesticide costs offset these decreases and allowing farmers' income to be maintained. So we've seen that in the DEFI network, we experience an average reduction of pesticide use by 20%. But we also know that in France, during the same period, there is no evidence that pesticide use was reduced. So what explains this lack of progress in France? Well, we can first start by saying that pesticide use reduction is possible, as we showed, but it's not easy because it requires a redesign cropping system by combining cropping practices, which can be quite difficult to do. And in the DEFI network, farmers were advised by advisors, and this raises the question on how can we advise better farmers into achieving this transition. Also, we've shown that pesticide use reduction was not associated with a decrease in margin on average, but we also didn't show that it was associated with an increase in margin on average, which means that motivation cannot come from that on average. We can also say that the current market is highly unfavorable to pesticide use reduction. Why? Well, because the cost of input is too low, and the selling price of the diversification crop is also too low. We can also say that consumer awareness on this specific subject is maybe a bit too low. And I have my former PhD director, Nicolas Munet-Jolin, who is a researcher in Dijon, in France, that had an idea of creating a pesticide score, which is basically the nutrient score, but only for pesticides. And it would classify goods from A to E in terms of how much pesticide have been used to produce them, and that would maybe help to raise consumer awareness. And finally, I'm gonna finish with that. So you've heard that pesticide use reduction could induce reduction in yields, and that obviously raises the question about food sovereignty, and I'm sure we're gonna have the opportunity to talk a bit more about that in the discussion. But we've started to try to answer to that, and what we've seen is that, okay, there's some crops that will produce in fewer quantities, but there are also other crops that will replace them and that will produce in more quantities. And overall, in France, we've made a study that showed that the trade balance will remain largely positive, even with really high levels of pesticide use reduction achieved. So I'm done with my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Very interesting to see how, I think this is debunking some kind of assumption about pesticide reduction very clearly. So thank you for this. And also for giving some ideas on the lack of progress and how then indeed it can be done. We will also have now a very practical example from someone who is leading the way day to day. So we have Géraud Dumont de Chassard, farmer in Belgium, who will explain to us his experience with pesticides reduction. So thank you very much for your for being here. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
So thank you to have me here. I fully agree with my neighbor. with what he said, and it's clearly what we try to do on the farm. It's to use a lot of tools, a lot of small things to change. And so we are 40 kilometers southeast from Brussels, so not far. And mainly we're producing grain, and we have more than 10 crops in the rotation. We have the main crop and small crops to help with the climate or adaptation about the weeds. But like you said, often it's not easy to market them, and we are more on a niche market. So I think we reduce a lot of pesticide, but because we want to, and we find another way to sell our products, or because we think for the future as well, and I think for us. So basically, my father started this journey more than 30 years ago, and he started to just stop to plow. So like this, we were able to, by the time, to improve our soil, to have more health in the soil. Like this, we can start to reduce the amount of fertilizer. After we start to reduce the fungicide. We are still using some, and I think it's a good balance of what we are doing for the moment and the stability in the yields. And now we try to work more and more on that by use fermented plant extracts. So we start a new small cooperative with farmers to produce ourselves our products, because often it's too expensive if you just buy them in a commercial way. So we try to work with other farmers to produce it like this. Some are able to produce few crops to produce this fertilizer. We work with compost tea, compost extracts, but I think we still keep some fungicides, but we, just in case we have difficult years, but one way to stop that, I think it's if we have some insurance from the society. Okay, you have a bad year because it was not easy, but you didn't use any pesticide. Maybe you can be compensated for that. That may be one of the solutions to maintain farm. I think it's just we have to put more nature in the farm, so we use more. We still have hedges. We have some grass strip, flower strip, to have to help some to have more insects to balance the pest one, and I think it's a balance between the production and the cost of the production, and I think that it's more now about the society of what they want, what they are able to pay as well, and not only on the farmers' hands. Because I think we have a lot of solutions, but at what time I think it's still the economics that need to be balanced. About time, if we are good. But if you have more questions after, I think we can. Yes.
Yes, we will try to keep some time for questions, even if we started a bit late. So yes, thank you very much for bringing this diversity of solutions. So there's not one easy solution, but it's farmer knowledge, also farmer wisdom that can bring this solution. So very much interesting to see. And also you raised the issue of the price, like who pays, the consumer, society, the farmer, this whole issue of societal costs and offsetting of the costs. So yeah, who takes the benefit? That's then another question that we also have. So yeah, thank you very much. Then we will go into our third let's say, testimony of solution or example of solution. So we see that we have them. Gil Luipaert from the International Biocontrol Manufacturers Association will also give his perspective. Okay. So you also have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. And I prepared a presentation. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah. For next slide, please. So. Thank you for this opportunity, and I don't think there is a further need to say that we need a sustainable way of controlling pests and diseases. And maybe why not working with biocontrol products? Because when working with nature, you can have also effective and sustainable tools to manage pests and diseases. But in order to do that in a competitive and innovative way, we need not only support from industry stakeholders, but also from the policymakers, in order to make sure that we get rid of competitive disadvantages for biocontrol, not only within Europe, but also from outside of Europe, and to ensure that farms being economically profitable and productive. So it's a call to you all and to us to make sure that we can work together in order to make a green future for agriculture. Next slide. So within IBMA, we have a definition. I will not go into detail, but I can just say that we have a definition based on 4 categories, based on microbial, so microorganisms, also semi-chemicals or pheromones, and natural substances, plant extracts, for instance. These 3 categories, they fall under the Plant Protection Regulation 1107. Besides that, we have another category, microbials, which are called also beneficial insects. We believe that biocontrol is an additional layer within IPM, which we have not only the agronomical practices, which we already touched upon, also monitoring is a very important layer, physical control measures. But above this, we have, or we say that biocontrol is a very innovative tool to control pests and diseases. And by applying these biocontrol tools in a correct way, we can have, let's say, a very promising solutions and to maintain that there is a sustainable agriculture with less impact on the environment and the biodiversity, while we can maintain a yield production to make sure that we can feed all people in the world. And in the next slide, we can see that biocontrol is a rapidly growing plant segment in this IPM triangle. And for instance, if we zoom in on the microbials, so on the left top corner, so one of the 4 categories, we see that the proportion of the European biocontrol market actually doubled between 2016 and 2022, which is, of course, good news, but we have to pay attention very much and make sure that we don't get a lot of competition, and we have to be innovative and maintain at the forefront. And in order to make this biocontrol feasible in the EU, please, next slide, there are some concrete actions needed. On the short term, for instance, there is a clear need for a harmonized EU-wide definition for biocontrol. This will help us a lot. But also, we have to think about science. We have seen already 2 scientific speakers, and we have to think also about biocontrol and science, because sometimes there is no need to go to the dossier anymore. Therefore, we would like to waive the renewal process for biocontrol products unless there is a scientific need. Further, we also advocate for more facilitate label extensions to make biocontrol products available not only for their specific crop or target, but also to make them available to other plants, other pests and diseases, and to make use of them in a much broader way. On the longer term, maybe there can be creation of a new regulatory framework for biocontrol products. Now I'll zoom in on 2 concrete examples based on viruses, so microorganisms again. We have here the first one is PMV01, which is a vaccine against pepino mosaic virus in tomato plants in a greenhouse. So it's a very specific product, but it works 100%. So it's based on the mechanism of cross-protection, in which the natural defense mechanism is triggered. It was the first mild virus approved in the EU already in 2015, so more than 10 years ago, and it has a low risk. It is well recognized by its peers because it has won a lot of prizes at certain fairs, but it's also well accepted by the growers in the greenhouse because we see that there is already more than 17,000 hectares of tomato vaccinated with this kind of product. And in the next slide, we see what future can bring us. So there are also new innovative technologies available This is, for instance, PA02, which is a mixture of bacteriophages. These are again a type of viruses that are able to control bacterial diseases, and this is a product specially developed to control fire blight, which is the causal agent of fire blight in apple and pear. And the mode of action is actually based on the infection of this bacterium, which is a very devastating disease to which nearly no products are available, and actually it causes the killing of the bacterium and the releasing of new bacteriophages. So with this product, we can also have, let's say, open field applications, so we don't have the specific niche for greenhouses or specific small crops, but we can also go to the open field. This shows clearly that there is innovative technologies in biocontrol available for farmers. So in the next slide, I'll come to my take-home message, in which we can say that there are the number of biocontrol products is increasing in the EU, which is, of course, a good news. But we have to pay attention to be at the forefront and to be competitive with other regions in the world, as we see that the legislative framework is getting more and more complicated, and therefore we see that there is a clear need for immediate simplification. With the main point, I think, is the biocontrol definition that will help everybody in this field, as well as some corrective measures, and then for the longer term, maybe the creation of a new regulatory framework for biocontrol. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much for another precise example that allows us to significantly reduce the use of pesticides here in Europe. We will take 5 to 10 minutes for some questions from the floor. If you would like to ask a question to one of the panelists, I ask you kindly to raise your hand. Also shortly introduce yourself and also specify to whom you are asking the question. So we are mainly looking for, of course, for solutions, for ways forward. We've had our wake-up call. And also if you have a question, also be mindful that we are here in a big room. So if you have a question that is relevant for a big part of the audience, that is also welcome. So we have time for a few questions. Without any obligation, of course. Yes.
Okay, first of all, congratulations and thank you very much, because it's very, very important debate. I am a member in Agri, and I am too Vice President for Internal Market and Protection Consumers. But I have one question for all panelists. Okay, I appreciated your presentation, but how do you achieve an optimal balance between environment protection and food security? I have before this meeting, another meeting with this debate, food security in Union European. How possibility do you have for balance, especially for you, because I know you have big problems, and you explain it's complicated. It's especially for small farmer. I don't know we have or not solution, because we have one issue for increased competitivity in agriculture, but don't have solution for don't use pesticide. For me, it's very difficult to understand, for explain in my country, what solution do you have in internal market for this? Sorry.
We will. I saw another hand for a question. Yes, and then we will go to answers.
Thank you, Jennifer Lewis from IBMA. It's a question for Romain and Nardella. Thank you very much for all the presentations. But there's apparently no financial loss in making this transition, no financial gain either. It's sort of cost profitability neutral. So what do you see as the possible solutions in terms of improving the uptake of biocontrol and this overall transition? Thank you.
I think Violette can start with answering the first question, yeah?
Yeah, thanks for your very interesting question. I think that we have to look a little bit at a holistic system. Actually, we are wasting 30% of the food which is produced. You have seen the costs which we produce due to the use of pesticides for human health and ecosystem quality. If we take these into consideration, and actually we produce about 4,000 calories per person per day in this world. If we would eat them all, we wouldn't be able to go through the door. So if you take this into consideration, and we imagine we eat about 2,500 calories per day, we don't waste food, or we may waste maybe 10% of the food. There is no problem of food security. There are more people who are dying of obesity than of hunger now in the world. I think it's very important to not see only production per hectare, but as well what happens with the food then, with the produced yield. And I think that is very important. And on the other hand, I am asking myself as well, there are a lot of technologies. You have this biocontrol, which you heard. You have protection, we have agroecological measures, and we have the robotics. There are people who think we will soon fly to the Mars, but we know that we have at our Earth robotics who can with infrared detect weeds, detect insects, detect whatever, and can be used in agriculture. We have milking robots. They are working, they are established. I don't know what is a barrier for farmers to use these robotics in their fields, which as well will help to make early warning systems happening and really implement precision farming.
Romain and Jérôme, you can also answer the first question, I think.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm going to start by answering to the first question, and then I will go back to the second one. It's my point of view, and also there's a lot of studies on that are being made right now that show that actually the main threat to food security and food sovereignty is not pesticide use reduction, but more the climate change, which actually is partly induced by the current agricultural system. And for me and my research, we can see that pesticide use reduction and all of what comes with it, which means crop diversification, which means, okay, less production of wheat, less production of rapeseed, maybe less production of maize and some barley, but also much more production of soybean, of plant-based protein, which means less importation of those. This also means that we use and we import less fertilizers from countries from which we import a lot of that. So actually pesticide use reduction overall, I think, is quite positive for food sovereignty. And as Violette say, we waste a lot of what we produce. So if we do that and we stop wasting all of what we produce, we could actually feed people better and achieve this food security stake, which is obviously central. Then if I answer to the second question, which was about what solutions for better uptake of pesticide practices that lead to pesticide use reduction. Just the figures that I gave you were averages that concern farms that are growing either some potatoes, some sugar beets, some maize, some rapeseed, and these are very different farms. There are some in which pesticide use reduction is more difficult than others because they use crops with higher value added. And obviously, if you, for example, grow a lot of potato and sugar beet, which are crops that require a lot of pesticides inherently, biologically, well, you will automatically lead to higher reductions in overall performance, economic performance of the farm than if you do that in a farm that uses crops that have less value added and less pesticide use. But on average, that's what's happening. But still, we need to find a way to embark the farmers into this transition. And also, as I said, it's possible, but it's very complicated, and that's why it was a success in the DEFI network farms, because they're advised a lot. And so that's what we should, I think, focus on. So first, advise farmers and help them to achieve this transition, and this will also help them not to feel like they're the ones on which the pressure is pushed all the time. So that's about advice, agronomic advice. I think there's also a lot of communication that needs to be made on the risks, because some do not exactly know the risks. Also on the possibility that it's possible, and that's also why this kind of networks such as the DEFI farm network are extremely useful, because they're real farms which really reduce their pesticide use, and these are examples that have a really high power it's really good for a farmer that see that it's possible in this network. It's much easier to embark also in the transition after that. And also there's a lot of policies that could be implemented on, for example, the price, as I said, of the diversification crops. Because, for example, obviously, if you want to diversify and go from a rapeseed, wheat, and barley crop rotation, which are crops that you can sell at a fairly high price, to a rotation where you include, for example, legumes, which will help to reduce the overall cropping system pesticide use, you need to be able to make money by introducing legumes. So you need to raise the price, obviously, the selling price of legume subspecies through subsidies and other systems. So that's, I think, the other part of the solution, obviously.
Thank you. Jérôme, you wanted also to add something on question one?
But for me, it's more an issue with the climate change that we suffer from the last 5 years. And I could say that with soil health, so that you reduce pesticide to improve it, you have more yield during this tough period. And if I take last year, I have more yield than my neighbors, because I don't want to sow the wheat during the winter, because for me the soil was too wet. So we go in spring crop, but we have a good structure, we have a good soil, so we are able to make a good yield with spring crop. With normally is still yielding less than winter crop. But I have some oats at 8 tons, and the average for wheat in the area was 7 tons, and normally we are 10 to 11 tons of wheat. So I don't know where is the issue with the security when you don't take care of the environment and of your soil. And I think we have a lot of solution, and we have to work with society and people. And like another issue that we have is the fertilization, and we will really decrease the yields. And because we are dependent on the gas for the fertilization, and if we add more legumes, we use more cattle just to have more grassland in the field, in the arable system, and that we graze. So we put the animal out in the field. We will improve the soil, reduce the pesticide use, and have a more resilient system. So for me, it's not an issue.
Thank you. This is really flagging this false opposition sometimes between environmental protection and production. You show very well that it can go hand in hand, which is beneficial for everyone, actually. With this, I would like to thank the speakers from the first panel. Thank you very much. I hope you stay on for the second panel. Maybe one more applause for our speakers. Thank you very much. I would like now to call Ms. Aguar Fernandez from DJ Sante, Ms. Ghislaine Laniel from DJ Agri, Martin Dermin from Pan Europe, and Ivanov from EFAT to this second panel. We will not take a break. We will immediately just switch panels and continue. So, very much welcome. Yes.
Hi, welcome. Hey, thank you very much. based in Ireland. I need to leave at 10 to 6.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we are now starting our second panel, which will focus on policy actions. So we've had a very interesting landscape, a wake-up call, and several inspiration for solutions. Of course, solutions need an enabling policy environment. So we will give the floor first to Ms. Aguar Fernandez from DJ Sante to maybe share with us a little bit more what policy measures are...
What now?
Yeah, what now? What does...
Okay.
Yeah, so you have 5 minutes, and I will keep you on time, as you are asking me to do. Voilà. So you have
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. No, I've asked to keep time because I'm based in Ireland and I will need to leave relatively early. But I think I will have enough time to take the points of what now, and I'm pretty sure that my colleague Catherine will complement very well on what then. So there is a lot of focus on the use of pesticides that has been there before. It was there when the Commission presented the SUR proposal, and it's still there. I want to start by making maybe a statement. It has been said here in the previous panel that SUR was abandoned. No, SUR wasn't abandoned. SUR was withdrawn by the Commission after it was rejected by the European Parliament and after there was no progress in the discussions at the Council. So we didn't abandon SUR. We withdrawn it because it was rejected at the European Parliament. So that stopped us working on the SUR proposal, but has not stopped us working on the reduction of pesticides. So what we have been doing now is focusing on SUD, which is the previous legal base, the existing legal base, and what we have now in our hands to progress in this joint or ambition and goal of reducing the use of pesticides, which I'm pretty sure that everybody around the table shares. So what have we done? Those concrete steps in that direction have been done through different strands, and I will discuss, or I will mention a few of them now that we have in our hands in DG Santé, but also it will be complemented by other things that are being done at different corners of the Commission, because we're not working on this in isolation. On the contrary, we're working hand on hand. So it has a number of the previous panelists have mentioned, biocontrols, that calls for specific measures on biocontrols, and I'm very happy to say that indeed, very clearly, there is this is an issue that has been addressed not only in the strategic dialogue, but then after in the vision for agriculture and food, where my colleague is taking the lead, so she will go into further detail into that. But I want to just stress that we, Commission, have committed to put forward a proposal in 2025 that accelerates the access for biopesticides in the market, so echoing what was requested here. It will provide a definition of biocontrol active substances. It will introduce the possibility for member states to grant provisional authorizations for these products while the evaluation is ongoing. And it will create a fast-track procedure for their approval and authorization that the member states do not have today. So this is something that has been put on writing. It's, black and white is there. But this is not the only thing that we are doing. On the contrary, we are also doing quite a number of other actions, or taking quite a number of other actions. So with regards of food, I would like to emphasize a couple of initiatives that we have. We are taking back the work done on audits on the implementation of food in different member states. So this is in our work program, has been in our work program since last year, and is in our work program this year, where we are looking into how member states are implementing the provisions in food. And at the same time also we have restarted the dialogue with the member states on the working group on food, where it provides us a forum to work together with member states, identifying areas where we can work together and progress, and where our common interests are the most important. And one of the issues in there, it's pretty clear, the progress in the proper IPM implementation. So those are things that are happening now. And I think that this is a proof that we never stopped caring about the reduction of pesticides, but it's also the building blocks of today, in which the future, which is now for probably going to be more expanded on the vision of agriculture, and food, that will be the Commission's, if I can say, compass into getting into this, or progressing into this reduction. There are, as you know, also we report every year on progress towards reduction of pesticides, because it's our obligation, and there has been a significant reduction since the beginning. Eventually, we are hoping to get there with the current trends. I have many other things to say, but I think that is more than 5 minutes, enough for me to say today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, very nice to hear that the implementation of the SUD and pesticides reduction is very much on the agenda of the Commission. So, yes, let's see where that takes us. I see that there are several measures with organizations who've organized this session. We've published a roadmap for the phase-out of pesticides, and I see that some of these ideas are also taken forward by DG Sante, so that's really great. It's, of course, also super relevant to hear from DG Agri, especially with the upcoming CAP reform, the recently published vision. So I think people are very curious to hear from DG Agri's perspective as well. And maybe also if you've read our roadmap, any reaction to that is also very much welcome. So yes, you also have.
So thank you very much, Annelies. Thank you for inviting me to this important and timely, as you say, event. As you suggested, maybe a couple of words on the vision and what's in the vision about pesticides, but just let me remind why a vision on agriculture and food that was published on the 19th of February. It has been clear that in the aftermath of farmers' protests, as well as the polarization of the debate in 2024 in particular, but of course it happened earlier, that it was very much needed to find a different way of working and to further engage, because the transition of our agriculture and food systems is necessary, and to do that you need to work with the stakeholders, including the farmers, and not against them and not without them. So we've built on the outcome of the strategic dialogue, which brought together 29 representatives of the food chain, from farm to consumers, non-governmental organizations, retailers, food industries. And what is in the vision from a general point of view, and what are the two main messages in the vision is that, first of all, we need a different approach to succeed in delivering the transition of our food system, working together, creating more buy-in, more alignment between the key players of the food chain. And to do that, of course, we want to work with the key players of the food chain. So as policymakers, what we are doing in the vision is that we identify the way we see the sector in 2040, building on what was in the strategic dialogue. And we identify the policy areas in which we think this will be important to deliver as policymakers, to support farmers and the key players of the food chain. And we don't say the vision is not an action plan with targets and deadlines. That's different maybe from the farm to fork strategy, though the direction of travel is still there, meaning we are still committed to deliver the overall ambition of the European Green Deal. It's mentioned in the vision, but we want to work in a different way to make the sector more attractive, and I'm not just talking about agriculture there, more attractive, more competitive, more resilient, but also working hand in hand with nature. So it's not nature against economy or social, it's doing everything together, which of course is much more difficult, but this is what we have to do. When we look at what is in the vision on pesticides, in fact, there are many references and several initiatives. I don't want to be boring with a long list. Maria Pilar has already mentioned some of the key initiatives in relation, in particular, to access to innovation, though we already have a lot of solutions, as it was demonstrated. We still need innovation and equip our farmers with innovative approach. Hence, the work on biopesticides, as well as more generally how we improve, accelerate the access to market of innovative and or low-risk product. But the vision refers also to the necessity to reward better the work, the good practices of the farmers, both not just with public support, starting with market-based incentives, as we call them. So we say that we will work on nature credits, carbon credits, which are market-based incentives that can help to reward better through market tools the work of the farmers and the fact that they deliver ecosystem services. We, of course, don't forget the CAP. The current CAP is already integrating, though we can always do a better job with the CAP. I'm anticipating some of the criticism that probably we will hear today. So we already have a number of elements in the current CAP, in the CAP strategic plan, which are interesting. In addition to the good agriculture practices, we have more than a quarter of the land, the EU land, agricultural land, subject to support specifically requiring reduction or more sustainable use of pesticides in more than 22 member states. So we think we should build on that, and that's why in the ongoing impact assessment of the next agricultural CAP that we are working on, we're going to look at how we can do a better job in offering a toolbox to farmers who want, on a voluntary basis, to improve their production system and their practices, de-risk also the change of practices and systems so that they can deliver, in particular, on the reduction of the use of pesticides. You will have seen also that we mention in the vision a more bottom-up approach as a general principle, and we have introduced a non-farm sustainability compass that was called in the strategic dialogue report a benchmarking system. We found this was not necessarily clear. I'm not sure that on-farm sustainability compass is clearer, but at least the idea there is that we work together. We don't have a precise idea of exactly how we are going to do that, but basically the idea is, can we work? We've seen that there are many systems, private and public, but mainly private systems, that are measuring the sustainability of our food system and more specifically our farming system. And so this is a bit of a Far West. We would like to make sure that here there is robust methodology to measure. So it includes pesticides, but not only. Every element of sustainability, the 3 pillars, economy, environment, and social. And we would like to see how we can work, possibly on a pilot project, to make sure that we have robust methodology to compare these metrics, and then give access, offer to the farmers, and I would say cooperatives and food industry, and why not retailers, a better way to access to the data and improve the way we measure the sustainability performance. So that could help on pesticides. And maybe the last point I can mention is in relation with the external dimension of our policy. The European Union is a major global key player, meaning that we are both exporting and importing agricultural product and food, and we want to make sure that we have better alignment of our standards on the international stage. So basically the idea is to make sure that we take measures to avoid that we import product with pesticides that have been banned in the European Union. And of course here we need to make a serious impact assessment and look at our regulation, and make sure also that we will explore how we can make sure that we are not exporting pesticides outside Europe which have been banned by the European Union. So these are elements which are important both for, I would say, the consistency of our policy, but also the protection of our workers. And with this, let me conclude saying that we look forward to working with you to design, to operationalize the vision, because as I say, this is not a top-down approach. We've indicated some policy areas in which we want to work, but to make it happen, we want to work with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. That was interesting, and I'm sure that there will be many questions as well. But before we go to more questions, it's important, as you say, to hear from different actors, so also from civil society. So I would like to give the floor to Martin, the director of PAN Europe, who will give his PAN's perspective also on what is needed at European policy level to make sure that we go to this reduction. So Martin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Annelies. And hello, everybody. Good afternoon. We often talk about pesticides, and it's something that struck me during the SUR debates about pesticide reduction and what alternatives, yields. But we, as a network, PAN Europe, we have 50 members across Europe. And they are very regularly contacted by citizens who are afraid on a daily basis because they live next to a vineyard, they live next to hop crops, and they have to take their kids home because the farmer is spraying next door, or they have to live with closed windows during heat waves in summer because of the spraying. So I think it's really important to also think that the discussion today is about millions of Europeans who have to live in difficult conditions. We had the presentation from Violette Geissen earlier about scientific knowledge on exposure, but then for citizens it's really a direct impact, and very often they don't know what to do because their mayor feels he cannot do anything, and I think it's really something to stress, and that's the reason also there's such a strong public support for a strong reduction in pesticide use. Already 2 European Citizens Initiative in the Conference for the Future of Europe that President von der Leyen asked for. There was also a strong demand on pesticide reduction. And as mentioned earlier by Annelies, we had this roadmap that 90 environmental, health and human rights NGOs signed and sent to the Commission to ask for a gradual pesticide phase-out. So when the sewer failed last year, well, end of 2023 and then in 2024, many people said, oh, but what are we going to do? We need something in replacement. And that's where a lot of people, decision makers, citizens, NGO people discovered that we have a directive, the SUD, that was already discussed, which is actually a very, very good piece of legislation. Its only shortcoming is that it's a directive, so it has been extremely badly transposed into national or regional legislations at member states or regional level, and thus it is also poorly implemented. I just want to give you a few examples with the SUD. If it were properly implemented, cities would all be pesticide-free. We had Dario Nardella, who used to be the mayor of Florence, which is a pesticide-free city in Italy. There are examples. There are countries in which all towns are pesticide-free. No more pesticides in playgrounds. No more pesticides used in parks to protect people. But this is already something that is in the SUD and that is mandatory. In the same way, synthetic pesticides, others than biocontrol or low-risk pesticides, would not be allowed anymore in Natura 2000 areas or over groundwater protected areas. So the SUD is a very strong piece of legislation, but the problem is that it is badly transposed and poorly implemented. So today with the previous speeches, we heard that we really need a system change. We need to move from cure to prevention. And we have enough, maybe not enough, but we already have a lot of scientific and empirical knowledge showing that alternatives exist, alternative systems exist, and that they allow for a drastic cut in pesticide use. We heard Géraud saying earlier that he doesn't use insecticides anymore. This is one of the amazing things with arable farmers who start implementing real integrated pest management, high-level IPM. It's one of the first pesticides they can drop. It's insecticides, and their testimony is that directly insects come back, natural predators, bees, wild pollinators, and so on. So these alternatives exist, but we also think that the EU has to play its role in leading with a trajectory for farmers, a clear long-term trajectory, not something that changes from one legislature to the other. So now we have the vision for agriculture and food. And the vision has, in our view, we see it as positively that they promote biocontrol. Biocontrol is part of the solution, but it is not the only solution. As Mr. Nandillon said, we need system change with integrated pest management where biocontrol is included in a system change. And this system change needs knowledge and also financial support to increase trainings of farmers, increase advisory services, public independent and advisory services. And this needs to be put in place at member state or at regional level, which for the moment is largely insufficient. And the burden on this transition is still very much on the shoulders of the farmers and the ones, like we heard earlier, who take the risk, who want to change themselves. They manage, but they might also lose money because they are not supported for this. So 2 demands to the Commission. One is about the future CAP. we really need this future cap or eventually an additional specific transition fund to be focused on helping farmers, training farmers, supporting them through maybe insurance schemes, as Madame Gélin said, by de-risking the change. It's something very important. We also positively welcome the fact that it's important to include the whole food chain, but we very much need to make sure that farmers are not, again, the one bearing the cost, and that all actors play an important role. And then the second demand to DG Santé is to do something that, in our view, should have been done in 2011, when the SUD was due to start being implemented, is to check how member states have transposed into national legislation the SUD, because we can say, oh yes, we want to improve the implementation. If the national transposition is bad, member states won't have a legal basis to implement better the SUD, and the implementation will never move forward, and it won't lead to this increase in protection of citizens' health, the environment, water, supporting farmers in the transition. Thank you.
This sounded all very possible, and yeah, let's hope that we can not sit here again in 4 or 5 years and saying again, let's hope for implementation. I also appreciated a lot that you talked about healthy rural livelihoods. This is an issue, I think, also for Europe. Like farmers live in the countryside, and we want to live there. We want to be able to have our kids there in a healthy way. So I think that's also something that can foster this depolarization. There's a perspective that we haven't heard yet today, which is also a very important one, which Ivan from EFAT will bring to us, which is the farm workers' perspective and their views on what we need from European policies. So Ivan, you also have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Anneli. And yeah, my name is Ivan Ivanov. I represent EFAT, farm workers, and I think it's very important that we have this event, this discussion today, and I think it's also important that also we speak about just transition when we speak about pesticides. This is actually a notion which I would say has been developed also within the trade union movement, just to make clear that in any kind of transition we need to have also the social side considered. Social consideration incorporated into the transition alongside the economic and environmental ones. And this is also very important to ensure also the acceptance of this transition. And that's why also I'm happy that we have also the just transition notion in the title. And yeah, I'm here to present more the perspective of workers, let's say, and to look, let's say, at how to shape the just transition out of pesticides from farm workers' perspective, from the workplace perspective. And I think I would like to make 3 main points in my intervention. First one, yeah, making, let's say, something which I would say it's like the reality check. What's the situation with the situation on the ground? We have actually as at European but also at national level legislation on occupational safety and health, but when we see how it's enforced and with the level of compliance, we see also a lot of problems also related to how pesticides are used and handled also by workers. We have in the regulation on occupational safety and health as main instrument the risk assessment in the workplace, but we see that unfortunately that it's quite often not conducted. We see, unfortunately, that's also, let's say, reports we receive from our member organizations, which are also on a daily basis on the field, that workers are not properly trained, not properly informed how to handle, how to use pesticides. We have, let's say, on the enforcement side, we have the labor enforcement authorities, but we see that they're also very much understaffed, that quite often they don't have the capacity in terms of knowledge, in terms of equipment also to understand the problems of farm workers also and to implement some immediate remedies. And we have quite often, unfortunately, also cases where protective equipment is not provided. We have at the same time also research saying that also, let's say, the protection function of protective equipment might be also overstated. So this comes together, and on top we have also, especially in the agricultural sector, a significant share of migrant workforce. And we know that they are very much dependent on their employers in terms of work permits, residence permits, but also accommodation, work contract. They have also poor knowledge of their rights, poor command of the language in the country of work, and for that reason, it's also important to see, just to bear in mind this reality on the ground when we develop policies, and to see how we can also provide remedies, protection, better protection for these workers. I think it's also important that this situation has been acknowledged also recently with agricultural policy. We have, with the last revision, also a social dimension introduced into the common agricultural policy. So it's not just the employment legislation which we can rely on, but we have also the common agricultural policy. And I think the instruments we have there on the social side in the common agricultural policy, I mean, we know that there will be a revision of, let's say, negotiations starting on the new CAP post-2027, and I would like to reiterate that it will be very important to strengthen the different elements on the social side. We have the social conditionality, which ties the respect of some provisions on occupational safety and health to the receiving direct payments, but also we have some elements on training, some elements also on advisory services, which also needs to be strengthened. A second point I would like to make is, unfortunately, we have a lot of cases, many cases where we are, late with our prevention work, where we have workers who fell sick because of the exposure to pesticides. And I think it's also a matter of justice to provide, let's say, proper recognition of occupational diseases and also proper compensation for these workers. This is currently not the case. First of all, we have a lot of occupational diseases which are linked to pesticides use, which are not recognized as occupational diseases in many countries by the social security system. And on the other side, we have also quite high standards how to prove the linkage between professional activity and occupational disease. So workers need to prove also this causal link, which in many cases also very difficult for workers. That's why actually EFAT has been advocating for many years to have so that any worker has a right to certificate documentation of the pesticides used during their work activity, which will tremendously facilitate also this the recognition and proving the linkage between the professional activity and occupational disease, and will provide for some justice. We'll do some justice and provide for proper compensation of the in the cases where we are too late and workers have fallen sick because of pesticides exposure. And last but not least, and I will speak with the language of occupational safety and health. We have actually in the occupational safety and health regulations, we have a particular hierarchy of measures when we have risk at the workplace. And surely we have the technical, the administrative, the protective equipment, but actually what comes first is the substitution, elimination of risks. And that's also, let's say, in the long term, something which we need to work on, how we reduce pesticides, how we make alternatives available. And this is also a matter of health, also for the farm workers, and that's why also EFAT is supporting the campaign on pesticides reduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivan. Yes, this is a perspective that we hadn't heard so much today yet, but indeed very important and brings us additional arguments in favor. Ms. Aguar-Fernandez agreed to stay to take one more question. So thank you very much. So we can take a few questions, and if someone has a question for our representative from DG Sante, then this is the moment. This is a unique moment. Violetta, I will give you the privilege.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question for both from DG Sante and DG Agri. It's very good. I hear with pleasure that you are making action to reduce pesticide risk. But I see I'm a little bit afraid that what I'm seeing now in agriculture is that plastic is replacing herbicides. Especially in organic farmings, you see these so-called biodegradable plastic, which is then transported together with the pesticides into the air and is all over as well. So I would just, it's not pesticides which is about, but it's about agricultural protection, plant protection, let's say like this. And there is nearly no regulation on this in this moment. And I just would like to warn a little bit that this plastic will not be the next pesticides. And I would appreciate it if the European Commission could think about how to as well guarantee and make risk assessment related to this plastic use in agriculture and the microplastics people are exposed to in the farmers' houses and all over where this plastic mulch is applied and as well in the food chain.
Violetta, that was more a comment than a question, in my opinion. So
yes, that was just. I don't know whether you have some plans to.
And indeed, you're right. It is not considered because it's not regulated under plant protection legislation, but it's an interesting comment and worth further reflection. Thank you.
I saw one more question there in the back.
First question for DG Sante. Thanks to the EFAT colleague for bringing up the issue of record keeping. And we know that the regulation on statistics on agricultural inputs and outputs is coming up. So how is that? That was already an obligation for farmers to record what they use on which parcels. And how is that progressing? Can you update us on that and how the member states will be able to move the information from the farmers to their administrations and then to the Commission, so we can get a proper assessment of how effectively reducing pesticides?
Thank you very much for that question. Indeed, you know that one of the problems we have currently is that we do not have our data that we have for are scarce. There are not really data on use. The only data existing are data on sales, and those are aggregated data. They're not by substances. So indeed, that makes the issue of indicators very difficult, and therefore the Commission worked on this new SIO regulation where we are going to have in the future, it's starting next year, and we will have in the future we hope to have in the future good data that are really reflecting the use of the different substances by different crops and the like. So the records, as you have mentioned, there is the obligation, there is an obligation of keeping records on the products that are used, but these records are not, there's not the obligation to have it in an electronic form. However, it is true that many member states have already put in place electronic systems that are capable of gathering this data at the national level, and this is where we are counting with member states. Member states, competent authorities, the statistic competent authorities are gathering this information already in some member states. They do have, Denmark is one of the examples. Spain was taking steps for doing that so they are moving from records in general to make records electronic and therefore immediately available. And there is a lot of work done by our colleagues in ESTAT together with the competent authorities in the member states, so these electronic records that are at the national level then they can be transmitted and compiled and used at the European level. And that will provide us, hopefully, with a much more accurate and complete and robust information than to work on indicators. Thank you. That's the current status. So if I'm not mistaken, and I think I'm right, SIO, as we call it, will enter into force next year. Thank you.
Romain, you can, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have a comment and a question, so I'll try to formulate the question following the comment. It's also directed to the DG Santé and the DG Agri, and it's related to the fact that, as I explained in my presentation, there's really the need of combining some crop management practices to reach pesticide use reduction. But often, pesticide reduction is thought of by only looking to one alternative and saying that we are going to change one practices, we're going to change pesticide use by using one practices, and until we don't have these available practices. And I would say, how is that going to be implemented in the following to really understand that it's a complete redesign of the cropping system? Because it seems to me from the outside point of view that it's quite complicated to brought that into policies, and so that's my question: how this implementation of redesign of multiple cropping practices is going to be implemented?
I'll give the floor to my colleague because I really should have left 10 minutes ago. But anyway, my point is here, I think that there is an important stakeholder that is missing in this dialogue, which is member states. Member states have a lot of actions, a lot of capacity, a lot of, the implementation of SUR is in their hands. So we do not have here the voice of member states. And I think that we both jumped at your comment because we don't see this as, this is not about substitution. There's no panacea and there's no A substitutes B. That cannot work. We don't see it like this. And colleague or the gentleman that is on your right is nodding because we all know that this is not A replaces B. We need to have an integral and a very systemic change that brings issues like lower risk pesticides together, IPM, which is an important tool, and we have been clearly bringing that to the market, faster authorizations for biocontrols. So we need to look at this from a systemic point of view. And it is pretty obvious that just thinking of changing one by the other is never going to work. But again, we're not working in isolation here in Brussels or in our case in Ireland. We do work hand in hand with all stakeholders, from farmers' associations to NGOs and civil society, from member states to users, professional users. And unless we all come together and really make this systemic change, things cannot progress. Thank you. But Catherine.
Yeah, well, Maria Pilar has said a lot, which I would concur with. Maybe just to add that the approach may be, because your question was how what policymakers can do at EU level. We cannot do everything, but I think what we can do, and it's at least what we indicate in the vision, is that we can improve what I would call the toolbox that farmers have access to help them when they want, obviously, to change their production system and reduce the use of pesticides. So it means improve the advisory services that are available to the farmers, because I think that this is essential. Provide them with public support through the CAP, which are incentivizing them to change their practices and de-risk the change of farming system or farming practices. And as I said, probably also create some market-based incentives that they can use, or the cooperatives or the food processing industry can use to reward them better when they are deploying practices which are better for the environment and climate. This is the way we see it. So much more of a bottom-up approach. Some people might say this is not ambitious enough. It would be fantastic to set targets, ambitious targets. We've tried with the Farm to Fork strategy. And I must say that it didn't work so successfully. So let's pursue the work on this, but in a different way, providing more incentives, support, financial support, technical support to the farmers. A dimension that has not been mentioned is also the social dimension. In general, changing is not something which is easy. We all know that in our personal life. So we need also to integrate that. Not easy for policymakers, but we need to integrate that. So that's why this approach where we would use a more incentive-based approach and discuss, engage with the stakeholders so that they don't feel they are just doing it because they have to do it or because the law has decided to do it, though we need the law. Obviously, I'm not saying that we don't need the law, but make sure that they identify, from their perspective, what's in it for them, and considering all the three dimensions of sustainability, so not neglecting also the social and the economic dimension of this transition, meaning if you want an economic player to adopt new practices, new production system, new business model also, you need to also make sure that there is something in it for them. So I think that's also what we are working on.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the panelists from this second panel. And we are now going to the closing remarks. I will first give the floor to MEP Ripa, who has been one of the hosts of this event, for which we again want to thank you. I give you the floor for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, and thank you also very much for conducting so well the panels. So that was a great work you did. And I want to thank for all the inspiring speeches, showcases, and discussions that we had. And I think one thing is crystal clear. The common agricultural policy for the next term needs a different approach, as DG Agri said, a systematic change, as DG Sante said, and we need to work all together in order to phase out the synthetic pesticides for the environment, for human health, especially also the health of farmers, and for the long-term sustainability of our food systems. And here we need an approach conciliating the traditional farming methods that rely heavily on pesticides with nature. And by adopting practices such as the integrated pest management, the regenerative agriculture and biocontrol, we can promote more sustainable systems that rely on biodiversity, soil health, and natural pest control. That this is possible, and farmers would that this is possible showed our event today. And I would like to thank again all panelists and also the Commission for being so present today. And I'm looking confident into the discussion on the next common agricultural policy. It is possible, our event made it clear, that our agriculture can be more sustainable and thus more resilient. We all have to work for healthier farming systems, as it would benefit us all, farmers, consumers, nature, and the economy, securing our food system, and especially it would benefit our planet. So thank you very much for it.
Thank you so much. Marta, what is your perspective on the session we just had? You have the floor.
Thank you, Annelies. I think we had really very high-level presentations and a good level of discussions. I'm really happy about this session. I would like to, yes, we heard a lot about positive examples, about solutions. It's true that as Pan-Europe, we raise awareness a lot on the toxicity of pesticides, but we are always very happy when we can talk about solutions. I think another positive thing, we didn't mention it yet, is that on last month or in January, there was the publication of a Eurobarometer saying that 80% of the European citizens are in favor of the CAP, of strong public support to our farmers. I think this is really important also to give us yes, more energy to transform this cap. Citizens want less pesticides. They are in favor of the cap, so we should definitely use cap money and eventually increase some budget for this this transition. As we heard today, the farmers, we have empirical, we have scientific knowledge showing that strong reduction of pesticide is possible. But then we see that the policies are lagging behind the implementation of the SUD. The cap is not supporting sufficiently this transition. So it's really important that that with all this available scientific knowledge that we tried to bring to the Commission, the Commission uses these solutions to really promote the transition. A just transition. Again, I think what's really important is that we treat well our farmers. Farmers produce our food, which is the basis of our health. And it's important to have happy farmers families as well, happy farm workers who do not, in the end, as they do too much for the moment, bear the burden of the transition. I think the Commission partly got the message, but we will also work in that direction with the farming community. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. As a parent living in the countryside, I have to say that I'm not completely comfortable yet with the future of the policy landscape. So I think we still have some work to do in the next years. So I want to thank again the MEPs, Ripa and Nardella, who have hosted us. I want to thank the panelists who took the time to come here from far, from close by, to share their expertise, their practices. I want to share the audience for your attention. Thank the audience for your attention, participation. A lot of people who were working in the background to make sure that this works, who have prepared this, who are not sitting here, but who also worked quite a lot. So yeah, let's keep working together in this next cycle to reduce pesticides and come with some better results in a few years. I wish you a pleasant evening and thank you for having been with us until the end. Good evening.